The first open beta for Diablo IV has come and gone, and with it we learned that Diablo IV is actually an MMO. And in this video I want to explore why that is, and also what I like about the game and what I don't like about the game and hope to see changed in the future. So let's talk about what makes Diablo IV an MMO. What do I think has changed this game to deserve to be called an MMO? Well, first of all, you have to log into the game. It has a login screen, it has login queues, and then you select your character, and then you go into another login queue to get into the game. This isn't something particularly new to Diablo specifically. When you're playing Diablo 3, you had login queues. Diablo 2 Resurrected also had login queues for a long time because of the amount of players. But this is something that only MMOs usually have. There isn't other ARPGs out there that I'm aware of that have login queues. So this is one aspect that kind of defines the MMO genres, and you're playing on online servers. There is no offline mode in this game. So that's one reason this game is kind of an MMO. Secondly, there are clans in the game, or guilds, whatever you want to call them, that you typically find in MMO games. You can invite your friends, you have a hierarchy, there are ranks and things, you have message of the day, you can create yourself a clan tabard and a name that people can see when you're walking around in the game world. This is another aspect that leans towards the MMO side of things. Additionally, not unlike Lost Ark and other MMOs, there are world events in this game that take place at very specific times that if you miss, you won't be able to partake in. So if you're like gone, you're outside the house, or you're at work, you won't be able to hit those world events, so you have to kind of plan your schedule around them. In this case, during the beta, we got to fight a Shaba the Pestilent, which was a giant world boss. It's kind of poison-inspired, and you had 15 minutes to take it down, so we had all these players on our server fighting it. The first try, we got it down with like 30 seconds left. Second try, we got it down with about 5 minutes. But it gives you a ton of loot, bunch of legendary items, had a chest that you could loot that had like a weekly lock on it, meaning I think you can only get that chest like once a week, because the second time we killed it, it was not there. So this is something that you find in MMOs. Another important point is that you will run into other players in your game world. This is not optional, unlike Diablo 3, where you had to invite people into your game world even though the game was online. This game has players in your world anyway. There's no way to get rid of them. There's no like private server for you to play on, at least not that I'm aware of. So you will see players in town, you'll see them out on the landscape, you'll run into them, do world events together, do other events out on the landscape together, trade with them, talk to them, communicate with them, just like you would with an MMO. There is a global chat, there's a guild chat, there are friend chats, etc. So there is a chat box for you to do this in. And again, these are all things that you would see in an MMO. And lastly, the game features level scaling, meaning that like the dungeons in the game, or at least the first area of the game, I don't know how to be through the entire game, scale with your level. So if you do a dungeon and you're level 8, it'll say that the dungeon is a level 8 dungeon, but if you go back and you're level 25, which is the level cap for beta, it will be a level 25 dungeon. This means the enemies inside will be a level 25. And that's not something you find in typical ARPGs. Normally, like Act 1, if you play like Diablo 2 Resurrected or Diablo 3 or any other ARPG, is a certain difficulty, and once you are powerful enough, you'll just face roll that difficulty. That is not the case so far, at least in the way the beta has shown, is that the enemies just keep growing with your level. This is something you would see in an MMO. Generally, MMOs like Elder Scrolls Online have a system now where enemies are about the same difficulty for you no matter what level you are, and it seems like they've done something similar here. Now, there are like level ranges for each zone in the game, and it's possible that because this one is capped at 25, that they don't go higher than that. You might face roll it if you're level 35. We don't know that for sure. But just playing the beta, it seems like enemies are going to scale up to your level, so you'll never really face roll them unless you get the gear that sets you apart to face roll them, but your level isn't going to play a huge impact in that. So now that we've talked about why Diablo 4 is an MMO, I want to talk about what the pros of that are, along with the other things that I really like, and then we'll get into the cons of it. So the first pro of this game being an MMO or an online RPG is that it's going to have tons of content, and the size of it is going to be huge, and there is going to be a lot of support from Blizzard for this game. We did see them support Diablo 3 very well, in my opinion. The game was an absolute disaster at launch. It is in a much, much better place right now. That game has come 360 in terms of like what that game was and what it is, so I think you can expect Diablo 4 to be supported, have tons of content, and even if you're not totally happy with where Diablo 4 is right now, I think, again, this game will just get better and better over time, and it's not going to like die off in a couple years, and this game's going to keep getting patches, keep getting things to do, and I think that's one of the pros. The next point is we have Diablo as an MMO. This is something I've been wondering about for years. Like, how would Diablo work if it was an MMO? Would it be better than Diablo if you could just take your character and have a limitless sanctuary world to play in that just constantly gets updated, and you don't have to move to another iteration or another iteration of sanctuary, but just keep playing in the same one? with constant updates for your character, with skills and new equipment and new itemization, and have your friends, etc. So this is something I've been wondering about. I'm sure other players have as well. And Blizzard did World of Warcraft, which is obviously the most popular MMO of all time. So them making MMO is, not the end of the world here. And I think that it's something I'd be curious to see how it pans out in the long run. And moving along to other points that I really liked about the beta. First of all is the art style of the game. I really like the visual appearance of this game. The UI isn't much to look at in my opinion, but the actual art style itself, I think it's a lot closer to what I would love to see in a Diablo game, closer to Diablo 1, closer to Diablo 2. Not as much like Diablo 3. It's not all the way there. It's somewhere between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 in terms of the way that they've done it, but I like the direction it went. Feels more like Diablo to me. Next is the music in this game. The music is absolutely fantastic. There were a couple tracks that absolutely gave me nostalgia vibes from Diablo 2. It's a game I've been playing on Twitch recently, so I was very familiar with the soundtrack in my head going into Diablo 4. And I just love the music of this game. It's dark, it has this classical feel to it, it's very, very good, and it makes you want to keep playing the game. They did a fantastic job on the music. And the funny thing about music, too, is it's one of those things that, if it's not present in the game and it's not good, it doesn't necessarily take away anything from the game. But if it's good and it's present and you notice it, it adds a lot to the game. So I'm pleasantly surprised that this was as good as it was. And next up is combat. I really like the dynamic combat of Diablo 4. I love that you have a skill bar and you're figuring out what skills you want on there. And I felt like I was using my skills all the time. And because of the way that you had like a limited time dodge, and you had to really work on positioning yourself and when to use your abilities and your cooldowns and how to use it in combat. I felt like I was always using all my abilities on my bar, so combat felt really good in my opinion. Reminded me of Lost Ark a lot in this respect because you have that limited time dodge and your build is made up of what skills you want on your bar and how you put your skill points into effect their passives. Had a very Lost Ark feel to it, but maybe a little bit more refined. And sort of piggybacking off that a little bit, the game seems to be in a good place in terms of build variety, at least from what I can tell so far. Of the 3 classes in the beta, it seems like there's at least 3 or 4 different ways you can set them up and get through the content successfully. So it's really hard to tell if that will carry over to the full version of the game, or if there'll just be meta builds that are viable and everything else isn't. I really like off-meta builds. It's fine if you want to get max DPS and you want and everyone copies that and that's what everyone plays, that's fine if you want to do that. But I really like being able to make builds that are just fun to play that can still get you through the content of this game. And maybe they can't get you through 100% of the content, but maybe they get you through 99% of the content or 98% of the content. I love that in this game. And I think the fact that there are 3 to 4 builds possible for each class in the beta currently that are viable up to 25, I think that means the game's in a pretty good place build variety-wise. We'll have to see how that carries over as the game world expands and there's more itemization, you get more loot, and as your character classes develop more and unlock more of their own unique features, if that actually is the case when you get to endgame, etc. But I think right now, from what I've seen so far, I think the game has the potential to have very good build variety, and that's great. And I will say, too, that the classes felt very different from one another. The Barbarian felt very, very tanky, and it didn't have the highest DPS, but it was very, very tough to kill. The Rogue was pretty squishy, had decent damage, was very, very good on the mobility front, and the Sorceress, of course, was absolutely obliterating everyone. Everyone and their mother was playing Sorceress during the beta just because they were absolutely top-tier DPS. So we'll see how the balancing pans out, but it was really nice to see that the classes felt and played differently from one another, and I hope that carries over to the Druid and Necromancer next weekend as well. So now that we've talked about the pros of Diablo 4 being an MMO and the things that I've liked about it so far, let's talk about the cons. The first con is obvious, I think, to anyone who's a Diablo fan, and it's that the Diablo 4 is less like Diablo than any of the other Diablo games. Diablo 1 is probably my favorite of the Diablo games, with Diablo 2 being close behind, and that's just probably nostalgia more than anything. Diablo 2 is obviously a better game than Diablo 1, but Diablo 1 was my first online experience in gaming, period, playing co-op, and I was blown away by that, so I really, really enjoyed that. But I played Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 primarily single player, and I feel like Diablo has always been a single player game first, with multiplayer tacked on that people could optionally do, but it was designed to be a single-player game with that aspect added on. Diablo 3 kind of went a different route with the online login required to play online, which obviously didn't sit well with people because there was no way to play offline. You couldn't even play offline if you wanted, even if you wanted to play single-player or even if you wanted to play multiplayer offline, you couldn't. And now with Diablo 4, there isn't even a way to remove people from your game world. So now it's multiplayer first, single-player last. And honestly, that's not what I expect from Diablo. If you call the game Diablo, that's not what I expect to see in that game. However, I'm enjoying the game so far, so I don't mind as much because I think they've done what they've done with Diablo okay. But to call it Diablo and then just change what the just core nature of the game is didn't sit with me that well. So obviously the next con of this is that come launch day, you're obviously going to be waiting in queues. There are going to be server issues. Even if there aren't server issues and everything goes smoothly, you're going to be waiting in a queue to play this game. And if you're playing the game and there is a server issue, or you know, your internet cuts out for a second or something and you get disconnected from the game, boom, right back into that queue, however many hours long that is. If you're playing Diablo, you don't expect to wait in a server queue to play a game. That's not what Diablo has historically been. So if you think of it as an MMO when this game comes out and you took time off work for it, know that you're going to be waiting in queues. You know, wake up early if you want to play all day and log yourself in before you get your breakfast and go back to sleep or something like that, because there are going to be server queues for this game for the first foreseeable couple weeks or month of this game, particularly during peak hours. The next thing is that rubber banding may affect your gameplay of this game. It certainly did in Diablo 3 a little bit. I think it probably will even more in Diablo 4 from what I've seen from the beta. I had a good amount of rubber banding. I don't know how you're going to play hardcore in this game with the rubber banding, the constant online connection. That's going to make hardcore a lot more difficult to play because you could get yourself killed, then it's not even your fault. And you also have things like world events and things like that. How does a hardcore character do these? I mean, that's got to be crazy. You must know the mechanics of that boss or whatever very, very well, because a lot of times world bosses just one-shot you. So if you get one shot as a hardcore character, like a lot of people did during the beta, doing that world boss, that's the end of that. Or maybe you just skip doing world bosses as a hardcore character, which kind of sucks. So we'll have to see how that goes. But it's going to be a lot harder to play a hardcore character, I think. And then the next point is obviously microtransactions in the online store and how much impact that's going to have on this game. It's a big concern after Diablo Immortal and the way that game was designed, and the fact that, you know, Asian MMOs in general tend to be pay to win, and this game is kind of stylized in the way an Asian MMO would be. We know there's going to be a battle pass for this game. We don't know what's on it. None of this stuff was in the beta, so I don't really have a lot of visibility to that. But there are concerns there that maybe this game might be pay to win, or it's going to be, you know, pushing the store all the time. I personally think Blizzard is smart enough to just put cosmetics in the game store and sell cosmetics because people like the game and they want their character to look cool or whatever. That's kind of what I visualize them putting in their store. I'm not super worried about this game being pay to win, but there is a concern for that, and obviously time will tell if that is a valid concern or not. Another negative point for me, which is the level scaling of this game, is that I wonder if gameplay is going to grow repetitive, and I think level scaling may play an impact in that, and that's because when I was going through the beta and I was doing like the dungeons and stuff like that and out on the landscape, it took me a little while to get through the mobs. And obviously my build wasn't optimized all that time, and you know, you can say, well, maybe you need to set up your build differently, etc. And I tried a lot of varieties of different builds and things like that. But it always felt like when I was going through dungeons, I wasn't just tearing through at the speed I felt like I should be or have in previous games for the amount of progress that my character had made. It felt like the entire time, or pretty close to the entire time, the speed at which I cleared a dungeon was roughly the same. Like, it never felt like it was getting faster as my character was getting more powerful. And I worry that by the time you get to, you know, the end of the campaign, or you get to end game, whatever you want to call it, that's the pace hasn't changed for you the whole way. Your character doesn't feel stronger, so you're just going to start avoiding activities because they aren't going faster for you. So I do worry that gameplay will get repetitive over time. The nature of ARPGs in general is a bit repetitive in my opinion, just because of doing activities over and over to farm loot. So I think there's a bit of a resistance from the community at large against this, so I don't think that's necessarily a point that everyone needs to be worried about, but I am not a big fan of repetitive gameplay. So this is a personal concern for me. It may not be for other people, and it wasn't terrible, but I am worried that by the time I get to endgame, I might be burnt out. And another thing that has me concerned is the activities of the game, or at least in the beta area, and I'm hoping it's just in the beta area, so it's not a huge concern. They get really repetitive, like the same group events or events that pop up on the landscape just keep popping up over and over, and there's like 4 or 5 varieties of them, and you know what you do, and it's just like, it's mind-numbing. Like, after doing them about twice each, I was like, oh god, like, you're really just doing it for the loot, and it wasn't interesting or fun at all. There was nothing innovative about it, these sort of little activities you do. And if those are peppered all throughout the game, and they're very similar all throughout the game, that's going to suck in my opinion. I hope that's really not the case, and that they change dynamically or drastically as you get outside the first area of the game. But from what I've seen so far, it has me slightly concerned they might not be. And the last point is that the graphics of this game clearly took a hit to make way for online performance. Anytime you have a persistently online game or an open world game, You have to kind of dumb the graphics down a little bit in order to make things load more quickly, in order to transmit data faster. So you can clearly see that the graphics of this game are not where people would probably prefer them to be. They're not terrible, but they're also not cutting edge or anything great for an ARPG. And I think that's partially or mostly due to the fact that this game is a persistently online game, and they needed to make that throughput through the internet faster so that there would be less rubber banding and obviously, less lag, etc. So that's one of the reasons I don't think a lot of people are impressed by what they're seeing visually from the game. So to kind of sum up my final thoughts for Diablo 4, I didn't go into it with huge expectations. Diablo 3 tempered my expectations. I went into Diablo 3 with massive expectations based on Diablo 2, arguably one of the best games I ever played growing up. And Diablo 3 was a huge letdown based on that. They went in a completely different direction with Diablo, and they've obviously changed the direction even further in terms of the online interactivity with Diablo 4. So going into Diablo 4, my expectations were very low, and they didn't disappoint, actually. They exceeded my expectations. Again, I wasn't expecting the world here, and I was expecting the game to go in a different direction than the other Diablo games were, so that wasn't like a shock to me or something like that. And I'm actually having a lot of fun with Diablo 4. What I've played so far has been pretty good. I think there's a lot of potential for this game depending on how the rest of it pans out. Can't wait to play the Druid and Necromancer next weekend. Druid is my favorite class in Diablo 2, so looking forward to that coming back here in Diablo 4. And I would just say that, if you can set aside for a second the fact that this is less like Diablo, and just set it aside and look at the game for what it is, I think you'll see that they have a decent game going on here. I know what it's like to do this. I've done this a few times now with Dragon Age. I've done this a few times with Fallout. When Fallout changed to Fallout 3, when I went to first person, I didn't want anything to do with that game because I love the isometric games. Fallout 1 and 2 are some of my all-time favorite games. But once I got over that, it took me a long time, and played Fallout 3, I really enjoyed it. I love New Vegas, etc. So if you can set that aside at some point and just play the game for what it is, I think you'll really like it. It doesn't mean you have to be happy about it, or it doesn't mean you have to forgive Blizzard for it, but I think the game is shaping up to be something decent, and I can't wait to see more from it. If you're still on the fence about this game and you're wondering, is it worth it, should I play it? This is what I would say. The open beta is next weekend. All the classes will be in the game. Go play the open beta. No matter what platform you're on, Xbox, PlayStation, PC, play the open beta. You don't have to pre-order it. Play it for yourself. See if you like it. That's all you got to do. I mean, there's no risk there except your time invested in seeing if you like it. You don't have to play very much if you don't like it. So go play that open beta, see if you like it. Come back here, comment on this video, and let me know what you think.